Is this it seems like we're doing this in order to accommodate this business, this gym that's in the area. Is there any other way? I mean, we've done an extension until the end of April that you were talking about. Is there any other way of allowing that business to be there without changing the UDO?
No, ma'am, there is not. Again, when we met in December, you gave the direction, excuse me, my voice is going. You gave the direction to the planning department at that time to look at what would be the best option to take care of this business, help this business out. There were several options, really. There's one is the idea of actually changing the UDO to allow this as a principal use, which we didn't see that happening, because once you do that, you really have opened the entire area, the entire historic zone itself up to this use going anywhere without any controls at all. The other thing would actually be for her to come in and ask for a rezoning of the property itself, which in our case we think would probably be more of a spot zone, and also you're making more of an intrusion really into the historic zone itself, and we couldn't support that. And then with the other option, of course, is amend the UDO, allow it as a special exception, whereas they still have to meet certain criteria, just like we talked about earlier, in terms of access and trash and all that. But we still, in that process, we also had to send out notices at least within 300 feet of the property of the potential special exception, which means it's a public hearing, it goes to PAC, it comes back to council, and council makes that final determination, provided they can meet all the criteria involved in all that. That was the best option we could come back to. We did meet with the business owner and explain that to her, what we thought of things, and we said that if you want to go forward with this, you need to make the application, not the planning department on this. And the planning department did not make this application. She has made the application to come forward with the change to the text, a text amendment change to the UDO, and with the possibility of a special exception should the UDO be approved for that operation. So that's where we are today.
Mr. City Manager, do you have some comments?
Mr. Mayor, I feel a need to kind of just a brief refresher for those sitting here and maybe some around the table and those watching by television that we were dealing with this gym issue as we approached the end of 2018. The building is owned by the Regional Commission, River Valley Regional Commission. They obviously leased the building to a private entity, which would then require that the building be properly zoned. If it was something operated by the Regional Valley Commission, I don't believe zoning would have applied, but since they leased it to a private entity, then zoning kicks in and the city attorney can verify. Then we learned of this issue through people in the historic district in the community, and we looked into it to find that it was indeed leased to a private entity, and so zoning would apply, and it would require a certificate of occupancy. And so they didn't meet zoning, they didn't have a certificate of occupancy, and so our inspections and codes department director was prepared and actually asked them to give them until the end of the year, December 31st at midnight, and we were going to shut them down. And so they got on public agenda, they came here, and they were granted 120 days extension to allow it to go through PAC, through the process, and come back to this body. And so now it is coming back, and so and it's going to go back to PAC because of the request that it be a minimum of 10,000 square feet, and so it's going to go back to PAC, back through that process, and then it'll come back to you. And so that's how we got to where we are today.
Okay. Councilor Woodson.
Yes. Also, through the process of all the communications that's been going on, the concerns of the citizens, and phone calls and emails, it was brought to my attention a couple times, so I want staff to check on this. I don't need an answer today, but I need for them to check. I understand that there are other businesses being conducted in the historic district that's not under the UDO. Because if this is the residents' concern of businesses coming into their community, and we're going to hold one business into the rules and regulations, then we need to hold everyone and make sure everything is to par with the UDO in the historic district.
And Mr. Mayor, would love to know what you know, because if we know it and we're not enforcing it, that's an issue for me.
Right.
And so if we know it, we are going to enforce the law.
And I've gotten a couple information, but I haven't verified it.
Sure.
But I want to go ahead and let it be known that if we're going to do this for the community, for it to be safe, for it to be as the community wants and works so hard to have this community the way it is, then we all need to be on the same sheet of music. And I'll go out and verify what I've been told, and then I'll come back and give you the names, and then you can go behind and check and see if it's so or not. Because, you know, a lot of rumors come out, a lot of things come out. I don't know what's true, what's not. But I'm going to go out and look, and then I'll be able to come back and confirm. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Thomas.
One of my concerns too on this, and I'm not sure to whom to address this to, whether it's inspections and codes or planning or whomever, but it seems to me that this business was pretty far down the road before we stepped in and said, wait a minute, your zoning is not correct. It's my understanding that they first applied for building permits to do some revamping in that building, and then it went to, it wasn't until it got to the business license and certificate of occupancy that somebody said, well, wait a minute, it's not zoned correctly. If a business comes to us, or a potential business comes to us to do this kind of thing, to do for a building permit, do we check the zoning to say to them, you can't do that in this zone?
Well, yes, here's the difference. The River Valley Regional Commission, because they are a governmental agency or whatever, when they came in to apply for the permit, it was understood at that time it was a Regional Valley Commission, and so it's not an issue if it was them, because they are not subject to the zoning.
Because they're a government
Exactly.
agency.
Exactly.
Government agency.
And then when the person came back to get the CO, it was revealed that it's a private entity, and that changed everything. Then that's when the zoning kicks in, because they leased it to a private entity to conduct this private business. And so then they would have to, zoning would apply, whereas it would not have applied with the Regional Valley Commission. And, of course, the certificate of occupancy. And so that's why it got off track in the beginning, because it was the River Valley Regional Commission.
Typically, though, in a private, you know, I'm over on Edgewood Boulevard, Edgewood Road, want to do something, and I come to ask for building permits. Do you look at that point at the zoning to say this fits or it doesn't fit?
Let me let John Hutchinson, the inspection and codes, you're getting a little bit down in the weed for me on that, but yes.
While John's putting that on there, Council Thomas, it's a two-step process, really. If it comes to planning department first, yes, that's the first time we look at it, zoning. But if they're going to come to him for a CO, that's the first thing he looks for as well.
So we do have somebody that checks that up front.
Absolutely.
And in this particular instance, it was because of the thought at the time that because it was a different governmental agency, the zoning didn't apply.
That's correct.
Okay.
As we, just real quick, this is the permit that was submitted by the Regional Valley, by Wayne Gentry Builders when they came and pulled the initial permit. And it says, it has check right there, Group B, and it tells me alterations. Now they tell me the extent of the work that they're doing is installing bathrooms. So that's all we knew at that point when they pulled the permit, that they were installing bathrooms. So when we looked at the plans, which are also submitted at the time of the plans.
And excuse me, Ms. Hutchinson, but that, just show that says River Valley Regional, the bottom.
Yes,
Yeah, that's what it says. I just wanted to.
Which was the owner of the building, but not the owner of the business.
That's correct.
At this point, you didn't know about a business.
Right.
Correct. So when the permit was pulled, these are the plans that were attached. And it just shows an addition of a bathroom into an empty, open space. So at that point, we proceeded to allow the permit to go because we had no reason to go against what was going on. The occupancy classification reads it's business. So at that point, it, under the IBC 2012, includes the use of a building or structure for office, professional, or service types transactions, including storage of records and accounts, business occupancies, use. So we were like, okay, at that point, once again, there was no reason for us to throw up a flag as to what was going on. When we came to the final inspection, when our building inspector came for the final inspection, he started to see like equipment in there. And so that's when he asked, hey, what's going on? We had a building final back on October the 4th, and we asked, hey, what's going on in this facility? So at that point, the owner came in to get a CO to operate the business, and that's when we told them you cannot operate as a gym in a historic area.
I'm sorry for the comedy of errors. And I think that's what it is. It's just
It's sort of a
several things
perfect
that have happened
storm,
there.
unfortunately, that just
unfortunately,
got us in this position. So.
Brought us to this point. Okay, thank you.
All right, we've got Councilor House that had some questions.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for the planning department. This is a point of clarification for me and probably for the audience as well. Regardless of how the wording finally sorts itself out, if it does go back to the bank, in the end, if this text change occurs, it's not saying that anybody can go set up a health and fitness business anywhere they want to in the historic district. If someone wants to, they have to apply back to the council, and the council would have to grant a special exception to allow them to set up the business. Is that correct?
Councilor, excuse me, Councilor House, you're absolutely correct with that. This is just a process that allows for that to happen, for someone to actually come in and out and apply for that kind of particular special exception. It does not grant them anything. There's nothing absolute about it. They still have to come before you. They still have to go through a public hearing. They still have to post a sign. We still have to do the notices, do the report, just like we do everything else. And you get to make that final determination.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. One thing I will say is I would make real sure that whatever square footage limitation we send back to PAC, that facility that's in operation now has that square footage. Please. So. Because that, yeah. And the other thing, and I won't belabor this because I know we've got a lot of residents, and we do want to hear from you. We ask you, though, that you would not be redundant. If somebody's already mentioned something that you wanted to bring up, we'd ask you that you hit on another concern as we move forward. But I will say that, to reiterate what Councilor House said, this is probably the purest form of government. This way you get to, just because there's an allowable use, that use can't go into place unless your elected officials deem that it would fit in that area. And the historic district is such a unique area. It is finding its balance between the services and the restaurants and opportunities that the residents want, and making sure that it still maintains that unique historic flavor. And our focus is on protecting that. So we can't do a lot about anything that's been grandfathered in and is there now, but we can be very, very careful about what we allow to go in there in the future. And this civic engagement, even though there was a little bit of misinformation, is so good, because this is how the process is supposed to work, where if you have concerns about your neighborhood, you let your elected officials know. So, Mr. City Attorney, and we may need some.
We've got a motion on the table I don't know if you want to hear from people that are here. It will come back, obviously, for another hearing.
I'm not sure Robert's rule of order, but I would rather hear from the residents before we took the vote.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you, okay.
That's fine, if
Okay.
you want to let people speak. Okay. If you want to comment on this special exception proposal in the historic district, the downtown district, please raise your hand and we'll call you up one at a time. Ma'am, come on up, give them your name and address.
I'm Joanne Koval. I'm actually the owner of CrossFit CSG. I live at 732 2nd Avenue and own a couple properties in the historic district myself with my family. And we are, just to give you a little bit of idea of what some of you have been to our facility, we are a low-impact facility. The most we go outside is to go run, which matches everybody else that's running in the historic district as well. Myself, I'm a runner, cyclist, swimmer, and so it fits why I moved to the historic district and the way that I would like to raise my daughter, and I guess it's one of the reasons that we moved down to the historic district, not necessarily to have CrossFit CSG in the historic district, but because of the community, the active community in the Uptown and historic district area. We have a dedicated parking lot. If you came down to the Uptown area last week, the thespians were in town, and I can assure you that our parking lot was utilized by them as well, but there were buses that were going up and down Front Street that were parked in the bike lane, and so when we're in business, which is very limited during the day, most of our classes are in the morning, and then in the evening after business hours, that parking lot is accessible to our athletes and to our members. And so we're off the street parking. We have very low impact, but just as a property owner myself, I completely understand where my neighbors are coming from, where I would not necessarily want a huge fitness facility next door to my house. But I think with the special exception and a minimum square footage proposal that Justin has brought up, I think it is appropriate, and I mean, I completely understand where they're coming from. I just think that in our facility where we're at, I think that can be negated in the future. So I'd like to continue forward with that. So thanks.
We do have a question, Ms. Councilor Garrett.
Ms. Koval, if you could.
Speed and agility.
As I'm sure you're aware, we got calls from both sides, a lot of residents yesterday, but there was some speculation thrown out about, basically a massive influx of people. And my understanding, CrossFit, everyone I've been to, you've got a circuit set up, so you are very limited in how many people can work out. What's your maximum capacity?
We pretty much cap our classes during the week at about 15 people per class. And then on the weekends, which anywhere from 15 to maybe 20 people. So if you look at the traffic impact throughout the day, we're looking at maybe 30 cars coming in and out of our parking lot throughout the day, from anywhere from 5:30 a.m. So we have a 5:30 a.m., 8:30 a.m., 9:30, noon, and our noon class is usually 2 people. So if you want to come work out at noon. So personal training, and then 4:30, 5:30, and 6:30 in the evening. So.
And you are shut down at 6:30?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I mean, our 6:30 class goes till 7:30.
Sure, 7:30.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
One other question that just came, I just thought of. I know in a lot of the CrossFits, they'll host competitions. And at that time, they can draw from a lot of other gyms throughout the area and people that are just maybe not even affiliated with a gym right now. Would you be opposed if this came back, if the special exception were granted, the change to the UDO, would you be opposed to to a stipulation that said you would not hold competitions at your site that would, because that's the only thing I think that might negatively impact some of the residents if the parking bleeds over into some of the other areas. We got plenty of time.
I think given the amount of parking spaces that are available off-street, so we have our parking lot, which we share with the Trade Center. We also have the Trade Center parking lot, which is right across the street. And given the size of our facility, which is 88, like our actual facility is 8,800 square feet, the amount of athletes that we would be able to hold would not exceed that parking.
Well, just be thinking about some kind of compromise. Sure. I would imagine something like that may come up.
I mean, to have the competitions like that down there would not be any more than the parking that the gun show brings, or that anything that happens in the Trade Center, the Holistic Expo. I mean, we're talking about 40, maybe a couple hundred people, maybe. But I mean, my other business is Tri-Columbus GA, where we do have that economic impact throughout the uptown and as well as the historic district. So a lot of my courses, my running courses, actually go past my house within the historic district, and we do bring in people anywhere from 500 to 600 people, and they are parking over by One Arsenal parking lot. And I mean, so on the weekend, you got to keep in mind that those competitions are also done on a Saturday or Sunday when businesses are and there's plenty of parking available. So and it's all combined within the facility itself. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, because that's a huge revenue builder for the business itself. They only happen once or twice a year.
Right.
It's not
Well,
like
I think to
every
me, and there will be some time, because if this is approved, then you would come back and you would apply for that special exception.
Sure.
And at that particular time, if there were any negotiations on whether it was the size of the competitions, the location of the competitions, banning off on-street parking or directing parking somewhere, that can be kind of negotiated. I just throw it out there because our primary concern at this point, I think, is just minimizing the impact on the historic district.
Sure. I just feel a little passionate about that compared to having thespians parking right in front of my door, all weekend long with, 3,000 people. There's no way we could even accommodate 300 people. So I don't, nobody's asked me that question before.
Well, no, so. Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. From the question, I was gathering what your answer is. Basically, it's not going to impact. If you held a race, it's not going to impact the businesses because it's on a weekend, and also it's not going to impact it downtown area any more than any other event we hold on the weekends.
Correct.
So it's to me
it's actually smaller.
Yeah, and I would be skeptical of putting that kind of restriction on you just because of where you're located. I mean,
sure.
If we put that restriction on you, then we'd have to look at putting it on other events that are held down there, and I wouldn't want to do that, because I'm assuming your event's going to attract folks from out of town.
Sure. I mean, to put it in perspective, like one of our races has an economic impact of almost $500,000 to the uptown community alone, and that's with 500 athletes that come in. So if you scale that back, I mean, the CrossFit people, our demographic is not, I mean, it's expensive to lift weights, so.
Never heard of it.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to be heard? If you would, come on up. So,
while they're coming, Councilor Davis.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know sometimes these things get caught up in two dangerous words, and that would be precedence and process, and it looks like it is getting kind of mixed up. I hope that we can find some common ground on this, because the precedence is, with the convention center there, being on the fringe of the historic district, with future plans for development that doesn't even compare to this. This is minute compared to some of the things on the drawing board. So that's something to consider in these arguments here. And then looking at how they're set up and the low impact. I hope, and some of I really appreciate the concerns, and I understand both sides, and there's good arguments on both sides. I think a lot of folks that I talked to that were in opposition said they're really concerned about just establishing it in the UDO, that they wasn't really, the special exception was kind of route is okay, and that's, when you talk about that, President, that does open it back up for case by case, public hearings, public input, public process, the council being able to look at it. I would never, I'm going to tell you, I'll go on record, I would never approve it in the middle of an established neighborhood. But there's a lot of properties out on the fringe that are businesses that, I mean, sooner or later, something's going to come up in those areas. And some of it's in general commercials, which you put anything in those areas. So that's probably enough said on that. But the process, like I said, I think that there's some ways to find some common ground. What I'm concerned about, and I'm okay, I'm listening to the conversation, and I'm concerned about the time and the clock ticking here. I think that what we need to do too, and I'm going to make a motion, I'll tell you why, is to add another 120 days. Because even, I don't know how this is going to turn out right now. I really don't know. I feel like there's going to be some way to find some common ground. But at that, I would hate to put a business owner in a hardship. And what we're talking about now doing, sending it back to PAC and making these moves is going to run the clock. And then all of a sudden, you're going to have a business owner that's like, what, depending on the outcome. If it works out well for everybody, then, and everybody agrees, then that's not an issue. If it doesn't, then you're going to have a business owner that's sitting there going, what do I do? And it takes time to move a business. It takes time to make these adjustments and all. So I think it's appropriate with this process to add an extension of 120 days. So if anything, there could be a transition period. If things all work out, it's not a non-issue. So I hope council would agree to that, along with whatever's considered and how to deal with this process today.
So it goes through April. So you're talking about 120 days on top of?
Correct.
So it'll be like the end of August, I guess, is that right? Somewhere around there?
120 days, 3 months.
End of July.
Okay.
May, June, July.
120 days be 4 months. Be 4 months.
The August.
I'm not sure how this works.
Yeah,
this is going right up to the 120-day mark, I'm assuming, right now.
I mean, well, there's a motion.
April is the 120-day mark.
Yeah, April, and we should be able to get it done by then, I think, but if, I mean, certainly it's a valid point. If it doesn't go the business owner's way, to provide a transition period, I think is what you're recommending.
Exactly.
And that, that's something that we could either do now or we could take up at a later date. Pops?
Just want to clarify.
Hang on, I got you.
Your motion. I want you to clarify your motion again.
Yes, I'm asking, along with, I think Councilor Woodson has a motion out. I got here a little later before that motion. I don't know exactly what that motion was, but I think it's to, everybody's talking about sending it back to PAC and taking time to go through the process, and it comes back to council. And I see that pushing it right up to the 120 days that we've already given them.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Okay, so depending on the outcome, look, if they work out a compromise and everything works, it's a non-issue. But if they don't, the business owner is going to be in a hardship to try to make a transition.
I'll support your motion. I'll second your motion.
They need time to make that adjustment.
Yeah. I just want a clarification. I'll second that.
Okay. There's there are two motions on the table, and I think we were holding the first one, I think, until we heard citizen input. Is there any problem with holding both of those until we allow the citizens to speak?
Mayor, I'm fine with
Okay.
that.
Any more conversation to that motion, though, however? Okay. Well, we'll move on with the public hearing part. Mr. Small, if you State your name and your address.
Ernie Smallman, I'm at 6 West 7th Street. I think the most challenging thing about this is we have a commercial section of the historic district and a residential section of the historic district operating under one code, being the HIST. So the Trade Center, the Marriott, the Space Science Center, Heritage Tower, the city's parking lot across from the government center, and then the expansion, hotel expansion space behind the Marriott, those are never going to be treated as single-family residential. They weren't designed that way. They don't function that way. They're too expensive to convert back. So to me, the special exception is the best way to allow appropriate businesses to function in those areas that are not appropriate to function in the residential section of the neighborhood. And it's the only district that I know of in town that has this crossover where everything, you have a lot of these businesses, you know, well, all the ones I mentioned are operating kind of under a grandfathered status. And so when we make any attempt to change anything, it ruffles a lot of feathers because nobody wants that next to their house. Well, I don't want it next to my house either, but I think it's completely appropriate for that location. And so having the special exception allows everybody to have the input. It allows the process. You have public hearing at PAC, you have public hearing at council, and council votes. You have staff reviewing it. I mean, it has a lot of oversight. And I don't know a better way for us to allow businesses to thrive in the historic district that are appropriate than to use the special exception.
Okay.
And then I also noticed nobody said anything about the other special exception in the public comments about lodging and clubs in neighborhoods, which covered the historic district as well. There was no opposition to that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Anybody else want to come up? All right.
These are,
Hi, my name is Fran Carpenter, and I live at 738 Broadway. I also have a business in the Liberty Heritage District on 5th Avenue, and I also have just purchased another house in the Historic District for renovation. The planning department said that they met with the business owner to discuss the options. The people they didn't meet with were the residents who live down there. So I would just like to ask that if you send this back to the PAC, that the neighborhood, that the citizens who live there, who've invested in their homes there, be allowed to have input on this issue as well, that we be informed of what's going on. A lot of people still don't really know or understand what's happening. And so I think a neighborhood meeting so that we could all air what the options are when that goes back to the PAC would be appropriate. I've heard a lot about this particular business in this particular location, and I don't think any of us really have a problem with this business in this location. But in order for that business to stay there, if it means that you open the door to commercial development right next door to our homes, we are concerned about that. We've made large investments as well. And so I would just ask that there be a more open process, that the neighborhood be included in the process, that the citizens who've invested in their houses there, in their homes, be included in that process.
that's a reasonable request. You know, and because I think what has happened, lacking that type of informative meeting, we've had a lot of just misinformation, misunderstanding, people's fears that it may have been misplaced simply because they didn't know what the process looked like. So, you know, I will be happy to meet with you and help you organize that.
I've already requested.
And it's already been requested. So we'll get that together so that you know what is coming to PAC this next time. And you do have an opportunity, by the way, at PAC to speak, just like you do here, to express your thoughts.
Okay. Come on up, sir.
Hi, my name is Sia Tamadi. I feel like I need to say something over here because of Ms. Mimi Woodson said that other businesses in downtown that doesn't meet the UDO. I think she meant by the art yoga and his school doesn't meet the UDO. When I opened a school about 20 years ago, all the classrooms are the same, all 700 square foot, and the rule is to whoever come for be a tenant on that school, first thing they got to do, they get their business license. And they go to building department, get their business license. Arta Yoga did exactly that. Brought their business license, showed me that they have business license in that place. Arta Yoga is a meditation class. It doesn't have no equipment, and their capacity is about 12 people. I mean, it's not my fault that they got the business license. If they do have that, then I gave them the right to stay in the school. And that's where they been in the school. And we got inside parking place that they never had problem with it. And as far as the neighborhood, they don't have any problem with it. The UDO changed, the problem I see the UDO changed to a special exemption is that I see that we're changing almost the chain of command over here as far as if somebody coming up to historic district trying to open a business, if it's not part of the UDO, then we say, well, you cannot come with it. But now when you change it to a special exemption, we lost that command. It comes straight to the council member. If they approve it, then they can come in there. Which is before that, it's just part of the law. Is you can't because of we had a parking requirement that was helping us a lot as far as bigger business that they could not open it up in historic district because of we do not have parking space in the historic district. But a few years ago, I don't know, last year or what, they took the parking requirement off of the historic district because of Uptown Columbus. And that hurt us a lot because now any business, any office, it doesn't matter how many square foot, you don't have to have parking place. You can, as a matter of fact, a good example of it, I'm opening up 4 more office in my schoolyard, which is I got land for it and all that. The first thing I tried to do, get the parking requirement. And when I went to the building permitting, he said, you don't have to do that. You don't have to have the parking requirement anymore. So that's pretty bad. Not that I'm going to have the parking requirement in my site, but that's pretty bad for historic district not to have it because everybody's going to get hurt. And that's.
I think the city manager wanted to make a comment.
Mr. Mayor, either now or later, preferably now, I'd really like for Inspection and Codes Director John Hutchison, so that we don't leave that unclear, to respond to what he just said and the business license requirement and so forth.
I think that's fine. Councilor Woodson, did you want to speak prior to that? Okay. Yeah, I think that might be a good idea to address that particular issue.
And the parking.
No.
In regards to the Arta Yoga, that property was, the CO was applied for before I became in inspections, and that was in 2013. When everything was brought up about fitness and all of that stuff, we started to look into them as well. As recently as last week, the new owner is supposedly coming in to change hands. So at that point, we stopped them from pulling a new CO because that has changed the CO because a new owner's coming in. So also this person will be a part of this new text amendment if approved, if they will be allowed to continue to operate there as a fitness facility for yoga.
And Mr. Mayor, Mr. Hutchison obviously does not handle parking, and the engineering director is going to step out to talk about the parking.